In my undergrad, I actually did a science degree.
Yeah, by the way, you did
So
math.
I did math
Yes.
and chemistry. So
Yeah.
according to the government of Kenya and its institutions,
You are a
I'm actually a scientist.
Coincidentally, I also did a science-related course. I did agriculture engineering. Well, it's actually called environmental and biosystems engineering. So yeah, I guess, yeah.
So that, and we're pastors.
And we're pastors, man. So
I guess that's this today is going to be a very short episode because we just decided to give an illustration
yes.
of how that
Yeah.
question.
Having said that, ladies and
Who
gentlemen,
came up with this question?
see you next time. Welcome to Tuesday Connect, where truth meets life. This is season 7, Common Questions Christians Ask. My name is Ted Wahome, and I'll be your host today. And I'm joined in studio by our senior pastor, and I'd like him to just say something as we start this particular episode.
Something?
He is called Sam, so I guess he has said something. You said part of my name.
So my name is Sam, pastor here at Mamlaka Hill Chapel, and glad to be here.
Absolutely. So Sam, today we're talking about this pertinent question, and it's more like an apologetics question, kind of, right? We're asking the question, are science and religion compatible? Go.
That's a question.
That's a question we're asking.
Even I was asking that
we're only
same
asking that
question.
you answer over the next half hour.
It's very interesting. Actually, something you need to note is in my undergrad, I actually did a science degree.
Yeah, by the way, you did
So
math.
I did math
Yes.
and chemistry. So
Yeah.
according to the government of Kenya and its institutions,
You are a
I'm actually a scientist.
Coincidentally, I also did a science-related course. I did agriculture engineering. Well, it's actually called environmental and biosystems engineering. So yeah, I guess, yeah.
So that, and we're pastors.
And we're pastors, man. So
I guess that's this today is going to be a very short episode because we just decided to give an illustration
yes.
of how that question.
Having said that, ladies and
Who
gentlemen,
came up with this question?
see you next time.
Done.
We have just proved that these two are compatible.
Yeah.
So thank you. You're
What
welcome.
else? Yeah, what else?
What else could you talk? So, but anyway, let's start by defining terms. What do we mean? I know it's actually, it may seem like a silly question maybe, but I think it's actually a necessary thing to just define terms.
Yeah, I think we can say of science, it's concerned with the natural world.
Yeah.
It's a study of the natural world. Maybe we can say empirically, which means through observation and carrying out experiments. I guess in order for us to understand our natural world.
Yeah. So it's just the quest to understand what's around us.
Yeah.
Through things like experimentation and stuff like that. Yeah, and judging the evidence that we get from that. Yeah.
There you have it.
There you have it. And
spend a lot of time in the lab. Actually,
in the
undergrad.
you
a lot of
literally
time in
did
the
that.
lab.
You really did that, actually.
Yeah.
And I think when you talk about religion, and the reason it's important to sort of define terms is because religion is a very broad term. It's a very broad term. So we were talking some time back with our colleague, Kadu, and he gave a very, very good and succinct definition of religion, just to sort of get our categories right, yeah? He said that it's a relationship between man and a being believed to be God, right? That often results in faith, acts of service, and a lifestyle of obedience.
He's a wise guy.
And he's a wise guy. Every once in a while.
I can't debate him on that one.
Right?
Accept. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like it actually makes sense. So it's a relationship between man and a being believed to be God that often results in faith, in acts of service, and lifestyle obedience. And if you think about that, it really covers all religions.
Yeah.
If you think about religion in plural, whatever religion you're thinking about, whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism or Christianity, it's that relationship between God and man that sort of often results in, faith. So the creatures believe in the existence, but also the certain characters and attributes of that being. They offer acts of service, may build a temple for that being. and construct, places of worship or something like that, or shrines or something like that, and also just obey what the dictates of that particular being, right? So now that we have our categories right, maybe the next question then that we ask is, why do you think this question comes in the first place? Why do people think that religion and science are incompatible?
I think this is trying to fight two siblings, if I may put it like that, when it is not necessary. Because the people view, when it comes to science, let's call that facts, the world of facts.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to religion, the world of faith. So facts, they try to make facts and faith, conflict, or appear as if they cannot be reconciled, or they're not compatible. But that's not how we see it, Facts and faith are like the two wings of a bird.
All right.
You do need both. In fact, I dare say it's impossible to not have both.
Okay.
Even science itself, as much as they want to make it appear as if it's a world of facts, you have to, at the very beginning, begin with a bit of faith.
Yeah.
Faith in the facts, for example.
Okay. But somebody might argue and say that, facts are verifiable. You can check facts against something, against a standard or something like that. So I'm wondering if, maybe are there specific examples that maybe, I don't know, anything that may come to mind?
I think
of how those two actually work together.
Those two work together.
Yeah.
First of all, where do these standards come from? You see, you have to begin, at the very beginning, you have to begin with some kind of faith.
Who sets the standard?
Who sets the standards?
Yeah. Who comes up with the standard? Okay.
Even the whole idea that I only believe in something if it's scientific. How can you prove even that statement in and of itself? You have to have some faith, in that study. Have some faith in that discipline.
Yeah.
So I think facts and faith are not necessarily enemies.
Yeah.
They are friends.
Okay.
And
you don't need to reconcile friends.
You don't need to reconcile friends, because they're not
they're friends
fighting.
already.
They're not fighting. Actually, somebody said that the two are complementary, faith and facts, because they try to answer different questions.
Yeah.
Science answers the question of how. How do things work? From observation.
Yeah.
And you can go much deeper through experiment. Trying to answer the question why. But then faith answers the question, why?
Yeah. Awesome. In fact, you've just reminded me of a quote from a very respected Jewish rabbi. He was called Jonathan Sachs, lived in the UK. And he said something that I think was significant. He said, science takes things apart to see how they work.
Yeah.
But religion puts them together to see what they mean.
Wow.
Wow, and I thought that's a beautiful way of sort of summing it up. That science takes things apart to see how they work, but religion puts them together to see what they mean. And I was, even as you were talking, man, I think you've said some really helpful things. That faith and facts actually, they're two wings of a bird, and they work together. Most scientists will actually acknowledge the fact that no serious progress has been made to explain, kabisa, the origin of the world. Right? Even if you go all the way down to, there were three atoms that combined, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, to form life. Yeah. You have to somewhat believe, in a sense, it's a leap of faith, that first of all, those atoms did not just come to be. And two, they did not just randomly connect. They were hanging out on a certain day, and then they said, see, we create life.
Yeah. And also,
yeah.
Were you there to make that observation? Because we're talking about observation being an important part of science.
Yeah.
We must observe. So were you there to observe those two atoms, which infinitesimally expanded rapidly?
Yes.
They're bringing about a big bang and so on. I think
yes.
At the very back of it, you will still find that even the proponents of science themselves will still need faith.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that by discounting religion altogether,
Yep.
they actually do not get rid of religion. They just make science a religion.
It's a religion on its
It's
own.
a religion
Actually.
on its own.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's among
Yeah.
friends with other religions. So stop trying to
To reconcile.
or
reconcile
fight.
friends. Yeah.
But I can speak of Christianity
Yeah.
and say that the God of the Bible is not anti-science. The God of the Bible does not want us to switch off our minds, when it comes to, dealing with Him.
Yeah.
In fact, we say about Christianity that our faith is not without reason. Because our God Himself says that He wants us to love Him with all of our hearts, with all of our souls, with all of our strength. But listen to this, with all of our minds.
Yes.
He wants us to use our minds. He didn't give us these minds and then have us forego its use when it comes to worshiping Him. And we see this very early in the Bible. Genesis, right there at the very beginning. God creates, Adam and Eve. And guess what He says? He says, look, here are the animals. Name them. There's a whole branch of science called taxonomy.
I know.
Classifying,
classification
classification of species.
Yeah.
God is the one who came up with the idea.
Can you imagine what
very beginning of the Bible, it tells you God is the one who is encouraging the use of the mind. I'm not going to tell you everything.
I love
He
that.
encourages discovery.
Yeah.
And He pushes you.
Man,
He pushed us.
That's
He pushed
good.
the first man.
Yeah.
Hey, you decide what they're going to be called. Classify them.
And then He places man on the garden, and He tells him, cultivate the land. Right? First of all, we don't even know, how did Adam cultivate the land? Did he have a djembe? Did he have to figure it out? Did he have to, because at that point in Genesis 2, it talks about how there were certain stones, precious stones. And so maybe God actually anticipated that these guys would actually mine the soil from, with all kinds of, find iron, fashion tools or something like that. I mean, now, of course, somebody might argue and say, well, these things came a bit later and stuff. But who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? God was actually, in a sense, calling man right from the start to employ the mind to know how to take care of, creation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so, wow, that's helpful. Another reason that I can think about, and maybe this is tied really to what you've mentioned on this question of why do people tend to think that science and faith are incompatible, is I think there are some voices, very, very key voices in our culture. And especially, I think, from the West. Because I feel like these questions have especially, they've reached our shores. In a sense, they're being discussed today in our land. But they didn't start here necessarily. And if you think about, one of the foremost atheists called Richard Dawkins, he's become very popular. I think his book, The God Delusion, is perhaps one of the most popular in that world. And so he talks about even the kind of God the Bible presents, He has, there's this paragraph, I wish I kind of pulled it. It just describes, what he thinks about God. He's egocentric, he is, chauvinistic, he is all kinds of things and stuff like that. So he describes God very, very, in such
very horrible,
very, very horrible terms, right?
Yeah.
But people like him, strong voices, have gone on to say that, because you can't prove, and there's a whole emphasis on evidence. There's not much evidence for Christianity. There's so much evidence for science and stuff like that. So I think strong voices like Dawkins have contributed to
this thing.
People now starting to think, I don't think science and religion are compatible. Yeah.
It's very interesting. And, and you talked about how they say that we cannot prove.
Yeah.
There is this quote by G.K. Chesterton. G.K. Chesterton was he was a thinker, an author, lived in
British philosopher. Yeah.
1940s, 50s, thereabout. This is what he said. He said it's absurd for, he was talking about evolution.
Okay.
It's absurd for evolutionists to complain that it is unthinkable for an admittedly unthinkable God to make everything out of nothing, and then pretend that it is more thinkable that nothing should turn itself into everything.
Oh,
it's a whole tongue twister.
Yeah, I know. It takes a minute to sort of get what he's saying, but then once you get it, it's like, wow, that's mind blowing.
The way they diss our position, as if theirs is more thinkable.
Yes.
Let me say it again. It says, it is absurd that the evolutionists to complain that it is unthinkable for an admittedly unthinkable God to make everything out of nothing, and then pretend as if it is more thinkable that nothing should turn itself into everything.
Exactly.
That nothing turned itself into everything.
Yes,
now that's more thinkable than the idea that there is
nothing
a God.
Made everything.
Nothing made everything.
Yes.
And then they insult our position that we are assuming that there is a God who made everything. That is a less rational position.
Absolutely. In fact, it takes more faith, one would argue. It takes more faith to believe that nothing made everything.
Yeah.
It takes fairly rational faith, in a sense, if I could use that word, to believe that God made everything out of nothing.
Yeah. And really, that was the motivation that actually led science to be the discipline that it is today. Because the early scientists, what motivated them to even give themselves into scientific discovery and so on, was this whole idea that there is a mind behind creation. The creation is not just a mindless force of nature, something, an infinitesimally small particle that, expanded rapidly, that whole thing that they say.
Yeah.
That's not how they viewed it. They knew there was a mind behind creation. And so they expected to find intelligence. When they examined it, they expected to find some kind of order, some kind of rationality. Because of their belief in God, they were motivated into scientific discovery. So I feel like faith in God has actually done more for science.
Exactly.
Than science has ever even done for,
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I was going to ask, what do you think, how do you think religion has played a part and a role in furthering science? Right?
Yeah.
And rightly so. I mean, you've mentioned, we could talk about people like Galileo, right? We could talk about people like Kepler. We could talk about people like Newton.
Isaac Newton. And by the way, these guys were theologians. Some of them were theologians.
Yes.
Blaise Pascal, the French mathematician.
Exactly. They were actually believers. Yes.
They would actually have scientific discovery notes on the one hand, and they would also have theological writings.
Exactly.
That they're writing on the other hand.
Absolutely. You know, when Isaac Newton discovered the law of gravity, it didn't take him to the place where he said, we've discovered gravity, now we don't need God.
Yeah.
Actually, soon after that, he wrote a book, I think it was called Principia Mathematica. And through it, he was trying to actually show people that I want you to know that the beauty of this thing actually explains the genius of the God who made this world. That the fact that, the law of gravity exists, that these are things that actually, we find in our world, is actually proof that there's a genius mind, there's someone behind this. And he hoped that people would actually come to believe in God just by reading his book.
There's something interesting, and I know we were talking about it earlier, where you said, this theory that they call it the God of the gaps.
Aha, yes.
Where they say, in an attempt to push back against faith, they say, the only reason God exists, the only reason we have him in our vocabulary is because we use him as fillers, for those things that we can't explain right now. Yeah. But over time, when we begin to understand things and are able to explain them, then we need God less and less and less as the explanation of things, But I think the opposite is actually true.
Yeah.
The more we understand reality, the more we understand things, the more our appreciation of God, the more we come to see, my goodness, this whole thing cannot be a product of chance.
Yeah.
This whole thing cannot be an accident, because we see order, we see intelligent design. It actually increases our appreciation of the divine being because it affirms his existence and his position.
Yes. C.S. Lewis said that, and reflecting on that very idea, that actually this scientific theologians, so to speak, that men became scientific because they expected the law in nature. And they expected the law in nature because they believed in a legislator, that is a lawgiver.
Ish.
So he was saying that, in fact, what theologians would do is that when they went into science, they knew that there were certain things they would expect, not by way of anticipating the results, in a sense, but they knew that the world operates on certain laws, and that became the basis upon which they actually came to see and to believe to actually observe the natural world and to sort of make observations on some of these laws that govern our world. Thank you. That's really helpful. So let me ask, and I don't know, maybe this is a slight detour. Perhaps there's somebody out there who is thinking that, well, I mean, you guys are just, saying these things, yes, but is there even any evidence that God exists, right? Somebody might be asking that question, and just saying, yeah, you just because of faith. Any comments on that?
So first of all, there's something Blaise Pascal said, which was that our faith is not without reason. So ours is not an unreasonable position. Okay. Though he also said that, our faith is not without reason, but it takes something a little bit more than reason.
Yes.
For our faith.
Yeah.
That's where the faith comes in.
Yeah.
One of the explanations about God is nature itself. I would say this to somebody who would ask me a question like that. Your very own existence begs the question, where did I come from?
Yeah.
Where did I come from? Even science itself has not been able to conclusively tell us about the origin of human life or life itself. It doesn't answer.
It doesn't answer those very deep existential questions.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Science itself does not
catching up with religion.
Yeah.
It's catching up with faith.
It's catching up with faith.
Yeah.
Your very own existence begs the question, where did I come from?
Absolutely.
It's called the cosmological argument, for the existence of God.
Yeah.
Just nature itself. The sun, the moon, the stars, the trees,
Absolutely.
they beg the question, where did these things come from?
Yeah.
And there has been no sufficient explanation for it. The one that comes closest is there is an intelligent being, that put all these things to place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's how come we see order. That's how come, the law of gravity, like you mentioned, Isaac Newton, we can actually calculate a mathematical formula for it.
Yeah.
It shows order. This thing is not accidental. It's not something that happened by chance, something that can just change from time to time.
Yeah.
It remains consistently like that. So our very own existence begs the question, where did we come from?
Yeah.
Things like beauty.
Yeah.
Appreciation of beauty. On what... How is it that many people can and recognize beauty when we see it? What standard do we use for this? And where did it come from?
Yeah.
Things like our morality.
Yeah.
We see that all around the world, we have a sense of what is right and what is wrong that we all share.
From a university professor to a guy in the Amazon.
Exactly. It's universal.
Yeah.
And it's not like we all called ourselves into a meeting and we decided, okay, we'll allow these things. No. Everywhere around the world you go, murder is recognized, as something wrong.
That reminds me, I think there's a book, and I haven't read it, I probably need to read it. I think it's by Blanchard. He's trying to ask the question, can we be good without God? Because certain people will say that, hey, our morality doesn't necessarily come from God. It just comes from us as human beings sort of self-regulating ourselves, in a sense. Yeah. But it still doesn't answer the question of that standard,
where did it come
that
from?
Even the need to self-regulate. Yeah. Where do you even get those ideas?
Exactly.
It's kind of like a computer that comes prepackaged with a software.
Yeah. Why the need? First of all, the idea that we need to regulate.
Where does it come from? Yes. The whole idea of society and governance. And civic life.
Exactly. The more you try to eliminate God, I think the more questions you raise.
Exactly. Yeah. You end up in a lot of trouble. There's so many more questions that you need to explain when that happens. And I want to follow that up with, all right, so perhaps there's somebody who genuinely struggles with, for instance, a scientist maybe, or somebody who's just fascinated with science, who struggles with the question, for instance, is, okay, fine, I read the Bible and I see things like miracles.
Yeah.
And miracles tend to be, in a sense, they will say, violations of the laws of nature. At least somebody walking on water, What do you mean? People sink in water. I know, what was this, Archimedes principle or something like that. I will displace the same volume of water that I throw the object in and stuff like that. What do you say to somebody who's actually struggling with some of these questions, especially regarding miracles? Come on. Ati how can a man be in a fish, in a whale for 3 days with all those acids, with all those juices and stuff like that? Zitaku, you know, they'll do
I think
things
you can
to
answer this better than me. I've heard you say something about miracles. I've heard you say something very good about miracles.
I don't know. Well, I mean, I think C.S. Lewis has written on this, you know, a little bit. And he actually gives another example, but I think he addresses this, and he talks about, for instance, fine, when you think about miracles and people who say that miracles are a violation of nature or the laws of nature. So, for instance, he says, imagine that you're sitting next to an apple tree and an apple falls. Now, that one is obeying, in a sense, the law of gravity, right? So supposing, for instance, you see the apple fall and you catch it. Are you violating the law of gravity?
Or you've just intervened.
Or maybe have you just intervened and sort of, in a sense, done something different so that the law of gravity does not apply in that particular instance?
Yeah.
Right?
Take its full effect.
Exactly.
On the apple.
And I think that's exactly what Jesus especially does when he comes and performs these miracles. Yes, we believe in the Archimedes principle, and we believe that, you know, if a body that is dense and stuff like that, you know, goes into water, it should sink ideally. But Jesus is able to actually intervene into that and change that, and that tells you something about that person. It's something that is meant to highlight, because miracles, in fact, in the book of John, they're called. John uses the word sign. In other words, it's something that points to the character and the attributes of the person who's performing these miracles. Right.
I think for me, I find it interesting that we say that, you know, miracles are those things that look as if they are violating the laws of nature. But I think the only reason why we call the thing nature or natural is because we have now come to get used to it. But the thing itself is actually a miracle. Whatever we're calling nature, whatever doesn't move us anymore, it's actually in and of itself, if you really think about it, miraculous. Like gravity, for example. Let's talk about the laws of nature. Where did it come from? Is it not a miraculous thing that it even exists in the first place?
Absolutely.
It's something that you have come to accept without any question. But
in itself,
where did it come from? Doesn't it not astound you? And if it has a source, if it came from somewhere, can that very same source that gave us the law of gravity, you know,
absolutely,
intervene and do something else?
Do something else. Do something different.
You get, so I think it's a problem. This is a question. There's a problem for the worldview of the scientists. It's not a problem for those of us who are in the worldview of the faith, because we do make room for these kinds of things.
You will expect that a designer will sometimes sort of deviate even from the design, in a sense, or manipulate, in a sense, his design for his purposes.
I mean, it's like one of the ridicule that we find as those who believe in creation. You know, they would come at the scriptures and say, "Hey, God created the world in 7 days." You know, that's absurd.
You know, what do you do with all the things that have been found?
You
know, the evidence.
7 days. All that 7 days we've done carbon dating. We've seen the world. You know, but look, I think anyone who, first of all, rushes to that, you know, miracle of creating everything in 7 days has actually even at first missed the biggest miracle of them all, which is God created everything out of nothing.
Like
absolutely. You're missing it. You're missing the point. If He can create everything out of nothing, now you want to tell me 7 days or intervening and, you know, walking on water, that would be a problem.
And might I add, I think there are genuine Christians who can maybe, perhaps, and maybe this is now a controversial statement. Is this where I say these views do not represent the views of Mamlaka Hill Chapel? They represent my own views. But really, there's aspects in which a genuine Christian can somehow have a version, for instance, of even like deistic evolution, in a sense. What that means is, fine, we see right in our fossils, and stuff like that have been excavated, evidence of something that seems to be a little older than what we know the Bible to say.
The young earth,
the
theory,
young earth theories, the old earth theories.
Years,
I don't look at somebody who has an old earth theory of the earth and say,
hey,
you're not a believer. You are out of
out
of the scriptures at all.
No.
Hey, who knows? Because none of us was there, right?
Yeah.
As you rightly put it earlier, who knows the process, the exact process that God used to sort of, in a sense, come up with the world?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
We don't know. These things that, of course, Genesis 1 tells us. But remember that Genesis 1 is not a scientific book.
Yeah.
Genesis is not a scientific book. The
It's
Bible
not trying
is
to
not
prove
necessarily-
scientific
it's not
theories. So
trying
if you
to
come
prove
with it with
scientific
scientific,
theories.
looking for scientific formulas,
You won't find it.
yeah, because that's not what it was trying
That's
to,
not what
to
it was
answer,
trying
to
to do. In
address.
fact, it was trying to answer other questions
Yeah.
altogether. It's trying to talk to a people who find themselves in a context where people believe that gods, right, created somehow, sometimes even out of flukes, or maybe to created the world out of a deluge or something like that, in order that man might serve their interests and purposes, purely just because they're too lazy and stuff. They think that we shouldn't do these things, and so let's do something here that and it creates a few people who will sort of do our dirty work, in a sense. Those kinds of things. So, I mean, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are not coming to us as modern scientific books. And sometimes we take modern eyes and read the ancient text as though it was a modern scientific book. Right?
You're trying to look for, those things for where does it say the earth is round?
Exactly.
Exactly. Or,
Yeah.
how many hours does it take to,
Yes.
to
You
go
won't
around
find that
its axis?
information. You won't find that information necessarily in the Bible, because that's not the question it's trying to ask.
Or, some people come to the Bible like this,
Yeah.
Aha, the Bible is saying that the sun rose and it set.
Yeah.
But we all know it's the earth.
It's the earth
that goes round,
Yes,
that rotates on its axis.
Yeah.
But look, the Bible doesn't, as you're saying, it's not like a book that tries to use scientific language.
Yeah.
It just uses normal, everyday language.
Absolutely. That was understandable to the people in that context.
And let me tell you the truth,
Yeah.
Ted. Even we don't use scientific language every time.
Exactly.
You don't see, the weatherman coming up on TV and saying you will experience some earth rotation from 6 a.m.
Yes.
And
I wake up in the morning and I say, hey, the sun is up.
Yeah.
The sun didn't go to sleep. And I know that.
We don't even use that
Yes,
language.
we don't use that language in everyday
Yeah.
conversation. And as we kind of begin to come to an end of this particular episode, I think there's so much juice and so many things to talk about this when you're discussing this topic. 1 Peter 3:15, talks about how every Christian should be ready to give a reasoned defense, in a sense, for the hope that they believe. Right? It uses the word apologia, and that's where you get the word apologetics. And the reality is, even after this episode, maybe someone that listens to this and says, okay, fine, maybe you're making sense on some things, but they'll still have questions that are still lingering, because sometimes some of these things actually come from very deep personal, existential crisis that somebody's facing and stuff like that. And so as Christians, we ought to, in a sense, ready ourselves. In fact, 1 Peter 3:15 says, be ready. Be ready to give a reasoned defense, right? Yeah. How can we do that? How can we equip ourselves to be ready to give that defense?
Yeah. There's one apologist who liked saying that behind every question, there is a questioner.
Aha.
So the Christian should always understand that people are not just asking questions because they're good questions.
Yeah.
Behind the question, there is somebody who's asking, and this person probably there's something that they're going through.
Yeah.
Try to go beyond the question to that person themselves.
Yeah.
And we know that sometimes people use these questions, these questions are sometimes stumbling blocks that they use to say that this is the reason why I'm not believing in God. And they put these questions there. So we must do the hard work of knowing how to answer some of these questions.
Absolutely.
And that verse that you read, 1 Peter 3:15, is a very good biblical imperative for us Christians on why we should do apologetics, out there. Yeah. It says, in your heart set apart Christ Jesus as Lord. Okay, you start with the Lordship of Christ for yourself.
For yourself.
And then it says, then always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give a reason for the hope that you have. Yeah. And then it says that you do it with gentleness and respect.
Absolutely.
You know, so the word preparation in that verse means that I'm anticipating some of these things, and I'm doing the hard work behind the scenes of trying to find how do I respond to this.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to the very thing I was telling you, where our faith is not actually against reason. It is for reason.
Yes.
You know, it promotes reason.
Yeah.
You know, because it challenges us to think critically about the questions that people are asking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So always be prepared, and then it tells us to give an answer to everybody. You know, so we must be ready to face the world, not just those who share our worldview, but even those who do not share our worldview.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, to give a reason. To give a reason.
Absolutely.
It recognizes that our faith is not without reason.
And we must do so with patience,
gentleness,
and humility,
respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. I can think of just perhaps somewhat in line with what you have said. If we don't have a living relationship with the God that we are trying to, in a sense, explain and talk about, then ours will just merely be an academic exercise. We'll have the facts. We'll have smart things to say, but not really a relationship. And sometimes it's easy to know if, like say, if you're observing two people, just the kind of relationship that they have sometimes, right? It's easy to see, or somebody talks about their loved one. It's easy to know if this person really has a relationship and a friendship with this person. And that's the hope, that we would have the flavor or the aroma of heaven, as we are talking here on earth, in a sense. And so, just agreeing with that and saying that even as we do that, our hope and our prayer is that all of us would actually have a very, very vibrant relationship with God. So that even if we're not able to give somebody like the best answers and the best defense, there's still something they can see and say, hey, okay, but there's something different. I mean, I can remember the apostles when they were taken before the Sanhedrin in Acts chapter 4. And he says, these guys were unschooled.
Ordinary men.
Yeah. But it was clear they had been with Jesus.
I know.
And that's the hope, man.
Yeah,
that's the hope.
And I think somebody said that the biggest apologetic is actually really our actions.
Absolutely.
Because people sometimes they hear with their eyes, and they think with their feelings.
Yes.
You know how you make people feel and things that you do.
Yeah.
So if we as Christians are going out there and we are living shady lives, it doesn't matter what we say. We push people away from God, and that's something that we ought to think about.
Absolutely.
I think lastly, I want to say this, Blaise Pascal.
Please,
Said that our faith is not against reason. Our faith is not against reason, but it goes beyond reason.
Love it.
Because it doesn't just take faith alone. Reason alone to know God. You need something more, which is faith.
Yeah.
But it is certainly not against reason.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I can say that.
Love it. Thank you so much, Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure and a joy just to have this episode and talk about this. Asante sana. I hope that you've had some thought-provoking things that you have sort of challenged you or comforted you or something like that. So our hope and our prayer is that we would engage. And so if you still have questions, if you still have things or concerns that you'd like to address, please go to the comment section and then just leave them there. And our hope is we'll come and check it out and of course just get back to you. But for now, we want to say thank you for joining us. God bless you so much and have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead.